Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to our local campaign planning webinar. My name is Sean Abbey. I'll be your moderator this morning as we go through this. We got some great guest speakers to help get us through this webinar. I'm the 2nd District Vice President for the State Union, and over the last 20 years, I've worked on campaigns all across the state and in my own local. So this is kind of something that I'm pretty passionate about and something that is really important for our locals. Before we get there in presenters, I kind of want to talk to you really quickly about the actual webinar format. So try to be as interactive as possible. Feel free to ask questions. I'll kind of show you how that works, answer the polls, things like that. It does help us and help make this experience better for everybody. We've also got a question area, so you can kind of go over here. There's a little panel you'll see. You can submit questions. A lot of times you can type those in. You can also, there's a little thing here, you can raise your hand on the right side of the screen so that you can raise your hand. I can call on you. You can ask a question that way as well. You can also chat. There's a little chat area where you can chat if you want to send a message or anything like that to me or anyone else in the room. Also, you can, up in the top here, you can screenshot the actual the PowerPoint as we're going through and use that later if you'd like. So you've got a kind of a copy of that to use later in a presentation or just to remind you kind of what you saw in the screen. Also, there's handouts. You can download them on that same panel on the right side there of your screen. You can download those to use later, and we'll talk about the handouts as we go. At the end of this, there'll be a survey. If you can please answer the questions, it's very brief, and that'll help us make better products later, and then also let us know how we did on this one. So appreciate your feedback. And this will be recorded. It is being recorded, so it will be put up on mpffu.org. So you can use it in the future, or you can refer it to any other members that might be going through a campaign or need some information. So we're going to get me off of here, and we're going to switch over to our presenters. It's a pleasure to introduce our two presenters this morning. We've got from the IFF, the Director of Strategic Campaigns, Doug Stern, right out of Ohio, right here in the 8th District. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Sean. How are you?
I'm good. How are things in DC this morning?
They're good. The weather's finally breaking. We're looking to do some exciting things for everybody.
Finally breaking. So when I was there the other day, they're putting in mulch and planting flowers. That's like, we've still got snowbanks here. Yeah. Also with us, Andy, are you on board?
I am.
Okay, Andy's here. He's our political director with the IFF. Thanks for being here, Andy. How you doing?
Doing all right. Looking forward to this.
All right, great. It's great that you're here this morning, especially for both of you coming off the legislative the conference in Washington. I know it's a busy time for you gentlemen, so thank you for your time. And here we go.
All right. So, guys, when Sean reached out to us about this, we could do days and days on local elections. And in fact, we do. A lot of our political training academy is built around this. A lot of what Doug and his team do with the communications training academy touches on this. We wanted to get across some basic concepts and some mindset on local elections here, and just kind of get you into the mode of thinking about how we think about campaigns. Every time we approach a new election, I try and sit down and go through kind of a basic thought exercise and get a plan on paper. So that I know what I need to be doing every step of the way on this. So, just at the very beginning of this, every election's got the same end goal, whether you are running a, fire district levy in a fire district of 10,000 people or a mayoral election in a city of 1 million, your goal is to get more votes than the other guy. The thing that makes you have to run a campaign is you got a problem that not everybody's going to vote. And not everybody who's going to vote will support you. So the solution to that problem is to run a campaign to change the behavior of voters. When you look at your electorate in general, you've got a bunch of different types of voters that you're going to deal with. We'll get a little bit into that here, but as you get into this campaign plan, I like to start out with a series of basic questions that the plan will then function to answer. Question number one, how many people do I need to vote for me? That is your win number. Question number two, who are you going to talk to? You're not going to talk to every voter. You should be talking to voters for a reason. And the reason should be that you need to change their behavior. So you got to look at your electorate and figure out, okay, out of this set of people that are probably going to show up to vote, who are the ones that I need to change something about in order to get the right outcome? Once you figure out who you need to talk to, then you got to figure out what you're going to say to them. That's going to be your campaign's message. Different voters may get different messages depending on what you need them to do differently, but you've got to have a baseline message at the beginning of the campaign that you stick with all the way through. The next question from there, this kind of lead, you can see these leading down a line here, is how are we going to say it? So if you know what you're going to say, how are you going to say that to those voters? That may be a face-to-face conversation, door knocking. It may be through direct mail or digital advertising. It may be through trying to get the press to cover you in a way that, pushes your message. The big questions you start getting into after this are the resourcing questions, and it's what makes campaigns a challenge. And that is, what does it take to have these conversations? Every action you take in a campaign, every time you do something, you are expending a campaign resource. So as you lay out your plan, you say, okay, well, I want to have these 6 conversations with the voter, a couple of them via paid advertising, a couple via door knocking, 1 or 2 via earned media. What does it take to get those conversations done? And then Sean has he's been good about bringing up what are some of the do's and don'ts of this campaign. And this is a big part of campaign planning because the rules dictate how you gather those resources and how you deploy them. Your campaign's rules may be dictated by the city, by the state, by special district rules, by the county. But there's always a set of guidelines and a set of rules that determine how you play this game. So Sean threw this poll question in here.
Before we get to the poll question, let me interject one thing real quick. We talked about resources that a local can use, and I think beyond just giving advice in a general sense like this, the IAFF, through District Vice President Sanders, has great resources for you. We essentially have a campaign team at the ready to help you. If you look at consulting fees, sometimes for a levy the size of most of the ones that we run, you're upwards of $15,000, $20,000 just for consulting. The IAFF, through your dues money, provides that same services with professional campaign folks like Andy, like me, to help you do those things so you don't have to hire a big staff to run your campaign if you're running a small, sales tax levy or a property tax initiative. The resources are here. So don't feel like you're on your own here trying to figure all of this out. One of the strongest resources you have at the very beginning, as soon as your municipality or your township is even thinking about doing something like this, get on the phone, send an email to Vice President Sanders, he'll get hold of us, and we'll all get on the phone together and start helping you get all the strategy that you're going to need to make it successful. So I just want to make sure that we touched on that before we went any farther, that tons of resources here at the IAFF headquarters that we can help you with.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I should clarify a little bit when I use that term resources, I'm talking about kind of the baseline 3 resources in a campaign, which are time, money, and people. The IAFF can be a force multiplier for you. We can help you maximize your time. We can help you do a better job organizing your human resources, your volunteers, your local union leaders. We can help you be more effective in using the things that you have at your disposal on that front. But yes, we engage in a ton of local election work. Doug's team and my team work together hand in hand. Basically anytime a local checks in with us saying that, through their district vice president, hey, we need help. We get to work on it. We have staff that spend a lot of their time every day dealing with locals, and this is no local is too small for this. I want to make sure that that's clear. I think sometimes folks are shy to ask for help. We don't want you to be shy. This is a change in how the IFS operated. that's been kind of developed over the last 5 years or so, starting up when the general president created the strategic campaigns department and started tasking our political department, already existing, with, getting more involved with local support. It's a huge part of what we do. Our staff actually really enjoy this part of the work. So we want you to check in. We want you to ask for help.
And just to tag on to that, Andy, your local needs to put in the work. It's not like the IFF is going to come in and do everything and run the whole. They're going to give you some great advice, great information, great direction, all that. But at the end of the day, it's up to your local to do that. I was in a local that we were doing this for not too long ago, and they had a millage in August that was going to totally destroy their local. They're going to cut like half of their department. It was horrible. So we had a meeting at the beginning of the whole campaign. The families were there. I'm talking like spouses and kids, and every member showed up, with exception of like one or two that couldn't make it. And they basically all committed that they were canceling their vacations that summer. They weren't going to, this campaign was going to be their number one objective through the whole summer. And that's the kind of buy-in you need to be successful, because this local did not have a lot of people, not a lot of extra resources. So they knew that they'd be all in, and they did that, and they were very successful. They saved their local and their department, and it was a great thing. But that was with the advice that you guys gave them, and then taking it and actually doing, formulating and doing that plan and executing it. So you guys do a great job. Getting on our first poll question, we'll hit on this real quick. Andy, do you think it's a smart thing to use union dollars to give to a candidate?
I would avoid that unless you are partial to spending your summer in state lockup.
Okay, there's our first one. Let's get a next one going here. Next poll talks about, can you use union dollars to support a ballot proposal? So here in Michigan, let's say we're trying to levy a millage, and you want to support that thing. If you guys can throw some answers on that. Is it okay to use your union money to support that ballot proposal? Go ahead and answer that really quickly. It's out there. Anybody want to answer? All right, and we'll close the poll. This one's actually you can. And Michigan, I don't know how if it's different everywhere, Andy or Doug, but in Michigan, you can use your union dollars to support a ballot proposal. You can't use it for candidates, but you can use it for a millage. A lot of times that's through a committee of some sort, but go ahead.
Here's an important part to bring up the difference, and I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to let Andy answer, because that's the way I like to do things, is give Andy more work. You can use, when we talk union dollars, I think there's a distinction between general fund dues money and PAC money, right? Like those are talking about union dollars.
Yeah.
Here, for a ballot initiative, you can use general fund money usually. And Andy, we want to save those hard PAC dollars for candidates, right?
Yeah.
So
it's a budgeting and resource question. And again, this gets back to the rules of the game dictate how the game is played. It is easier for you to amass dues dollars than it is for you to raise PAC money. I think we all know that. Look, it's asking people to give voluntarily to political action is difficult. So you want to save those dollars for the things that have the tougher legal requirements, which is usually the direct contribution to a candidate. Ballot measures, by and large, and this is true around the country, you can use union treasury dollars, so dues money, to help fund a ballot measure campaign. Some states let you do it just straight out of the treasury. Other places you need to set up a specific ballot committee. I know Michigan, we've had some back and forth on it. I always think it's cleaner to set up a specific ballot committee for it. The other reason to do that is that if you have partners that you're working with, it is easier to get them to write a check to, protect Saginaw public safety than it is to write a check to Saginaw Local 321.
Right.
Sorry to get the local number wrong. I think that's actually Racine, Wisconsin. But it's easier to do it that way. But yeah, I mean, this always gets back to, and there's I think a point at the very end of this presentation that I'll get to, but I'll kind of hit this along the way. Ask a lawyer, or ask somebody who has access to a lawyer before you jump ahead with campaign activities. Look, this is different law than most of us are used to dealing with. Sometimes it is counterintuitive. It changes. State legislatures muck around with this all the time. The worst, the worst phone calls we get here are somebody calling and saying, "I did this. Is it legal?" Usually we put the phone down and go hit our head against the wall, and go pick the phone back up and go, "Okay, let me call my lawyer."
Which you should have
we
done.
would prefer that. Yeah. We would rather, if you're not sure about it, we'd rather have you reach out and look. MPFFU, I'm sure, has got connects with lawyers in the state that are more familiar with Michigan law. We at the IFF, though, from our political department, we have an attorney on retainer, and this is different than the IFF legal department. But we have an attorney on retainer whose sole job it is to provide us with guidance on campaign finance and election law around the country. And the dude we have that we work with regularly, Dave Matrani, is a stone cold nerd and will run this stuff down for us. So if you're ever in a situation where you're like, "Hey, we're not sure," best thing you can do is just get yourself in the habit of ask us first, or ask somebody first. And I know we all kind of have a firehouse lawyer around it sometimes. It's worth checking with somebody that does it for a living, because the sands shift here. This stuff moves around, and it's worth knowing what the current interpretation of the current law is.
Yep. And in Michigan, we've always said the committee way is a good way to do it, just because you're funneling your money to that committee for one, but then when you have to put your name on everything. So when you're putting your name on signs or whatever, your website or whatever it is, if it's the committee, it looks less self-serving than if it said, of course the firefighters are supporting this because they want to keep their jobs, and it's not necessarily about that, it's about the community. So I've got another quick poll here. So can you use your fire station as a campaign headquarters? You want to chime in on that really quickly, and we'll close it up because we already got some responses. Probably not a good idea, right, Andy?
Yeah, I would I would avoid that. That's anytime you're talking about using a public taxpayer-funded resource on a campaign, you want to be careful about it. Now, there are some places where if it is a city-sponsored ballot measure, they may send an informational mailer out. We've had places where they send a piece of mail out with a water bill, or they might conduct a poll. Again, if it's the city or the special district sponsoring it. By and large, that's not the case, though, and you guys should really take care to avoid using public resources for any type of campaign. That includes city email addresses. That includes using the phone or the computers at your station.
Dropping off yard signs from the fire truck is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, and we laugh. We've seen that happen.
Yep.
I think having that clearly delineated line between what you do at the firehouse and what you do away from the firehouse as far as running the campaign, having that line is super important, because, like Andy said, there's some stiff penalties sometimes for some of these violations. Not just legally, but you don't want right before your voters go to vote on your levy a story coming out that says you broke the law. That's not the best. That's not the message discipline that we're looking to roll out 2 weeks before voters go and decide whether they're for us or against us.
Whoops. Where'd they go? So really quick, I want to hit on something from the state. This is just something I want to tie into our program. That's kind of off the beaten path here, but just I want to remind everybody that we do have a constitution bylaws for the state union that if you are going to make any state endorsements, you do need the support of the MPFFU. So if there's a candidate that you want to run, just make sure you bring that to the MPFFU. We'll talk about the board meeting, and we do take our locals' input on our endorsements when we're making those decisions. But that's not necessarily the end all be all, because in Lansing, things go a little differently than they do back home. So we've had a person, let's say, that's been in office for a long time, very supportive of us, done a great job, and then all of a sudden this local's mayor wants to run against. He's been very, very supportive of the local and of that city, and now he's running against the candidate that's been a staunch supporter of us for a long time. And you can see how those battles can kind of get sticky. So it's not always just a cut and dry. If the local wants that support, it's just going to be they're going to get it. We take every single endorsement very seriously, and we weigh all the pros and cons of every endorsement we make. So I just want to put that in there real quick, just to make sure that everybody understands. We do have issues with that sometimes with locals just endorsing people on their own. Make sure you understand there is a bylaw that talks about that, and make sure you're aware of it. Thanks, guys. We'll keep going here.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Oh, really quick, this is just for Michigan. This is our michigan.gov/SOS, Secretary of State. That's going to give you all of your information to help you with some of these things. If you want information on, example, getting started as a ballot committee question committee, there's a whole PDF on that. Basically, ballot question committee manual. There's one of those as well. So there's a lot of resources on the Secretary of State's website. I think Michigan does a really good job. I'm not sure that's the only one I'm familiar with, but they do an excellent job of putting information out there to make sure you're not breaking the rules. All the dates and deadlines and everything like that are on there. It's a great resource, so check that out. The plan.
Yeah. So remember we were talking about the questions that go into that you're going to have in every campaign. The campaign plan is where you write the answers to these questions. People ask me a lot of the times, hey, do you have a template that I can fill in? There's not. And the reason is that every campaign has a different set of circumstances and a different set of voters, a different set of rules and needs that go into it. If you build an outline based on answering the questions that we laid out ahead, you're going to pretty much be there. They are going to be, wildly different. A campaign plan where you're spending $1 million and talking to, hundreds of thousands of voters is going to look very different. There's going to be a lot more detail, a lot more in and out than a campaign plan where you're talking to 10,000 voters, or 5,000. But the process is always going to be sort of the same. You're always going to come back to some core principles and some core goals. And you're always going to be dealing with a set of limited resources. And let's go to the next slide for those. You have 3 resources in every campaign. There's time, there's money, and there's people. And without going too deep into this, the most valuable of these is time, because it is always finite. Every election ends. There is always a day when voters have to vote by, and that's it. So you're always on a clock. And you have to really be careful about how you use your time, find ways to give yourself a longer window to work on these elections. With more time, you can raise more money and you can recruit more people. But all 3 are resources that are limited at some point. Next slide.
Before we get into that, Andy, when we talk about time and we talk anything with the plan, put it in writing, have it written down. You're more likely to follow through with a written plan than you are something that's in your head. It's harder to change it if it's written down and people have shared it. When we talk about time, having a set calendar is very important, not just for when you're going to send out postcards or when you're going to do certain things, but message-wise as well. We'll get into that in a little bit. We'll talk about message, but knowing what your message is and what you're talking about at that time is going to be very important so everybody knows, right? So we write it down, everybody's going to see it. And when we write it down, we can share it and have more people take ownership of what we're doing.
That's exactly right. It's also a way, it's if you've got a team running these races, and most of the time this is a team. This isn't, even if it's a single campaign manager, you're answering to somebody. Everybody answers to somebody. The written plan enables you to get everybody to sign off and agree and say, yes, this is what we're doing. And if we're going to change it, we have to all get together and agree to make the change, so that nobody's freelancing, nobody's going out there off message, nobody is spending money that they're not authorized to spend. It keeps the trains on the tracks. And look, 6 months out from the election, it may seem a little rote. It may seem a little bit like, God, why are we having to be so formal? But when you're 6 weeks out or 6 days out and things are getting much more high pressure, you want that bedrock plan to be able to go back to. So you can say, look, we know what we're supposed to be doing today. We know who's supposed to be doing it. Here's what we're doing. It lets you, kind of hold up against the storm when things get crazy. With limited resources, and every campaign has limited resources. There's no campaign in the history of politics that has had unlimited resources. There's people that you think are close. Barack Obama in 2008, man, every volunteer in the world wanted to show up. Every Democratic volunteer in the world wanted to show up for them. They had scads of money, but it wasn't unlimited. They still had to focus on certain states. And us, when we're talking about, a local union trying to execute a tax increase ballot measure, you're definitely limited. You have a finite amount of money in your bank account. You have a limited base of volunteers. You're talking about your members' family and friends. But you are limited in what your campaign is going to be able to do. So to deal with that limit, we work to target our resources. And what targeting means is that we're going to find the voters who we are most able to change their behavior for this election. This is kind of like Moneyball in baseball. You're looking for the efficiency. For us, we are looking for the most efficient path to find you your win number. So for a very local election, for a mill levy, your first and best targeting is going to define the likely voters. And I just want to give you an example of what targeting for a municipal local election can look like. We're going to go to that next slide. Imagine you're in a city that's got a population of 500,000 people that are voting age eligible. That's all the 18-year-olds and above. Well, maybe 75% of those are registered voters. So right off the bat, you're trimming out 125,000 people there. You've got 375,000 registered voters. The thing about a local election, you may be talking 25% turnout at best, and that's probably like a mayor's race. That knocks you down right there to 90,000 voters. And then if you think about among those 90,000 voters, who are the people that you can actually change the behavior of? Who are the ones that you can make more likely to show up, or who are the ones that you can change how they're going to vote? That may be less than half. We just threw some numbers down here. We've got about 49,000 there. And then you may look at, okay, who are the ones that we really need to talk to the most at the doors? What are the voters that we think are the most valuable, the most likely to change their behavior if we deliver message to them? That might be as few as 14,000 doors. So you're talking again about a city with voting age eligible population of 50,000 people, and you've narrowed down to somewhere around 15,000 doors out of that population. You really are dealing with very narrow segments of the electorate when you get into this targeting and when you focus it down on the people that you most need to talk to. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit of detail here. Your win number, which I referenced earlier, that is the number of people you need to win the election. A lot of people say, okay, 50% plus one. Well, yes, that's technically what you need to win the election. We build plans around 52%. And the reason we do it is because turnout can sometimes fluctuate up or down. 52% gives you a cushion to work with. The expected vote, that's who's showing up. And to find that expected vote, we will go into your Secretary of State's website and look at turnout in the last couple of similar elections. Now, this is not just the last 2 elections or 3 elections in your city, because you may be talking about, okay, fall of 2018. That was bang up turnout. There were a lot of people that showed up to vote in that race. Presidential election, 2016, ton of people showed up. What you want to look for is the last couple of similar elections. So if you're on a spring off-year ballot, you want to look at the last off-year spring ballot and the one before that. Voters that show up in elections tend to be the same people over and over. You'll have some turnover, old people die, new people become old people. But these spring elections, you want to look back at similar elections to find the people that are similar. And by spring elections, this is a shorthand for not general elections, not even year general elections. Within those likely voters, those expected voters, you've got 2 segments of people that you really are going to be focusing on. The first ones are targets that we call persuasion targets. And those are people who are going to show up and vote, like they're going to get there no matter what, but we don't know who they're going to vote for. And we want to try and persuade them to vote for you. The other type of target is a turnout target or a GOTV target. GOTV is get out the vote. A turnout target is somebody who's going to support you, but they might not actually show up. So those are people that, you want to change the behavior to make them a likely voter. So again, this gets back to, we're running a campaign to change people's behavior. The persuasion targets, we are trying to change them on how they vote. The turnout target is trying to get them to vote. So those are your two sets of targets. Then again, remember, going back to the questions of the campaign, those are the voters we know we need to talk to. So we got to figure out what we're going to say to them. And I'm going to let Doug take over on this one.
And then really quick before you go too much more further, Andy. So also in Michigan, I'm not sure how it is in other states. So Doug and Andy can kind of step in, but we have specific dates in Michigan. No longer can a school district or a city just pick a date willy-nilly and say we're going to have an election on that date. The state qualifies 3 to 4 elections a year, and those dates are on the Secretary of State's website. And they're generally, for sure, they're in May, August, and November every year. And then sometimes they do one this time of year as well, depending on what's going on. But those are specific set dates, and you should know what those are. And obviously they each have their pluses and minuses, like Andy said. In Michigan, August is a tough one for turnout. So that might be good for you guys because a lot of people are out of town. A lot of people. So if you're looking for a low voter turnout, August, as long as it's not a primary, is a good place to start. November, like Andy says, tough, and then May is pretty good as well. The winter one is tough because it's tough to go door to door and get people to volunteer when it's 20 degrees out, and quite frankly, a lot of people don't want to open their doors when it's 20 degrees out. So each of them has their pluses and minuses, but you should know that there's specific dates in Michigan, and you can find those at the Secretary of State's website.
So we talked about who we're going to talk to, right? You work with Andy's team. We're going to need to go to the next slide, Sean. You've talked to Andy's team. They've helped you identify the voters that we want to reach out. They've found your persuadables. They've found your GOTV voters. But we need to know what we're going to say to them. What is our campaign's message? Essentially, we need to tell them 3 points. Usually we focus those on safety because safety is our product, right? We're firefighters. This levy makes you and your family safer. We like to go with 3 points though. So if, safe police, it helps police, it helps fire, it helps streets, whatever we need to do. When we ran Senate Bill 5 issue 2 in Ohio, we used unsafe, unfair, and hurts us all. They're very short, punchy points that everybody can remember when they're out there talking to people. So our message when we do these things is never about us as firefighters. People don't vote for firefighters, they vote for themselves. We can say, this is going to be good, support your firefighters, vote here. But essentially, when we do that, we're asking people to make the assumption that supporting firefighters is also supporting them. We need to make it more clear that this is about them. This is about keeping their family safe. This is about their neighborhood. This is about their community. So one of the things that we talk about all the time is staffing. We need more staffing at the firehouse. Well, staffing doesn't really tell people anything. We need to make that point of saying is we need this levy to put more firefighters on the fire trucks to keep our community safe. Yes, it's more words. I get that. And we told you, we're going to tell you later to be short and succinct. But it's important to describe what it actually does. Let's not assume that people understand our business because they don't. They don't know what we do. They don't understand that just having a big red fire truck show up isn't enough. We need people there. So we need to make sure all of our message is boiled down to its very basic point. The very basic point for almost everything we do is keeping the community and families safe. So think about that as we go through. Once we start talking about delivering the message, there's 4 ways that we can do that. There's direct voter contact, which is, in my personal opinion, the absolute #1 goal on the pyramid of the hierarchy pyramid. It's at the top. You have to knock doors. We know for a fact that when people have a firefighter come to their door and ask them for their support of an issue, voters are more likely to support that issue. So any plan that we're going to give you, any plan that we help you with, any plan that we're encouraging you to do, always has an aspect of knocking the doors. That's why Andy boiled his 500,000 person city down to 14,000 doors to knock. That's the number one goal of everything we do. And it saves you money by going to the doors because you don't have to send out mailers as much. We want to put things in. We want to send mailers. We want to send postcards. That's part of the paid media part down there. But that's costly. It costs us to print them and then to put postage on them. If we can go out and knock doors, not only is it more successful, but it's saving us that expensive postage cost as well. We can augment that by doing phone calls. Sometimes not as successful because it's not personal. It's not face-to-face. They don't see that firefighter t-shirt, so it may not be as good. One of the things that we're getting more and more into is the digital and social media advertising. We can do a lot of banner ads very cheaply. We just did one in a city. We got over 1 million impressions in banner ads for like $5,000. We did a video pre-roll where on YouTube, when it pops up and says, watch this video before you can watch the video you want to watch. We did one in Chicago for award. What did we spend up there, Andy, on Gardner?
Really, what, about 15 grand, 10 grand?
Yeah. We spent 10, 50 grand. And we got 250,000 people that saw it. It was so successful. We so inundated that community with our message for this candidate that comments on the video ranged from, okay, I get it, to stop sending me these, I'm going to vote anyway. And some even said, if I see any more of these, I'm not going to vote. So we were uber successful in reaching what we wanted to for a very little amount of money when you're talking about the reach that we had. So that social media piece and the digital advertising is taking off, and it is successful. It's taking the place, quite honestly, a lot of places that can't afford television. I've worked probably over 100 different, sales tax levies, income tax levies. I've never once bought television until one this year in Colorado Springs. That's a $500,000 campaign. So most of the things that we're talking about in this phone call are never going to involve television. And I think understanding that early is important. We may do some radio if it's cheap, but most of our digital thing, most of the production things that we do, we can help you with here from E18 and from our design team are going to be social media related. We can help you create the videos if you'd like. We can help if you have video that you've shot, your fire truck rolling out the door, some of your firefighters at work. We can help you create that 15-second video piece that you can then put on social media to reach people. We can also help you find the target the buy and make the buy. So it's all something that we can do, the IAFF can do for you. When we talk about the paid media, mail is important. When you do your levy, you should anticipate hitting someone no less than 3 times with mail. We know repetition is important. People to understand the message. Research tells us that people have to see the message 11 times before it becomes part of their psyche and it starts resonating with them. We're probably not going to be able to afford mail 11 times, but if we can mail them at least 3 times, so something hits their mailbox, we can combine some social media ads, a door knock or 2 in there, and then we add the earned media in the press. We're going to be successful at getting our message through to people. Earned media is not easy to get, but it is a great validator. Having your story on the evening news goes a long way towards people giving it, support and understanding that it is a big deal. I will say all of those things kind of match together. Andy talked about time. On social media, you should begin your campaign as soon as you possibly can. And that means even before you know there's going to be a campaign. Your local should have a strong Facebook presence, a strong social media presence, a strong Twitter presence right now. Build up for the campaign. I have never been a fan of creating a separate Facebook page for a campaign because you've done all the work to build your brand with your community. You've done all the work. You've done all the outreach, you've done all the safety tips on your social media page. Why would you then give up all of that and start over? I would suggest using your page and going from there so that you can intersperse it with your safety messages as well as levy messages. Now, if there's even a chance you're going to have a levy, now would be the time to start building up all of your social media stuff. Let's move on to the next page, please. So we talked about going to the. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I was going to say, just kind of talk about some details on the doors. And this is how this goes into, the plan that you need to lay out. This is the kind of level of detail of the plan that you need to lay out. So if you know the doors are going to be your most effective contact, you need to think about the resources you need to get it done. And that's going to be time, and it's going to be people. So in order to get your plan out, you work backwards from your numbers. You know that a canvassing shift, the average time that somebody's out on the doors is about 3 hours, where they hit about 40 doors. This can be, in a nice dense neighborhood, it might be more. In somewhere where you got to do, drive and hop, it might be a little less. 40 is a good average to work from. So you can then do the math. So if you know that you've got, 400 doors on your targeted list, then you know that you need 10 shifts to hit each of those doors once. And if you need 10 shifts, how many volunteers do you need to do that? Well, theoretically, if you're going to do it over one weekend, that's 10. Maybe you really only need 5, and everybody's going to come in for 2 shifts. But you need to figure out how many volunteers you need. And then you need to figure out, how long is it going to take me to get those volunteers? Because not everybody you ask is going to say yes. Hopefully among your membership, it's a high participation rate. But you may need to go through 15, 20 guys to get those 5 guys for that one first weekend. Because people are busy. I mean, look, we know members have, side jobs. They've got family obligations. They've got a lot of this stuff. You're going to have to make asks. You're going to have to make direct asks of people to do this volunteering. You can't just throw a post on Facebook for the local's Facebook page, say, hey, come help the campaign, and expect people to show up and do the right work. The person that's organizing this, the organizer, the campaign manager, you need to have a specific time and place where you're asking people to show up, and you need to ask them directly to do it. So build your plan in for that. Same with paid media. And Doug, I'll let you kind of go through kind of the pluses and minuses on these paid media choices.
Yes. So we got into it a little bit, but let's, really delve down deeper. The direct mail, the postcards, we can target to the list that Andy's team provides us. So we can make sure that we're reaching the right people. We're reaching those persuadable voters, and we're reaching our get out the vote piece. Through the science of political science, we know we're not going to target, the people that aren't going to vote for us. And we do that through some different ways, but essentially we're going to make sure we're not sending a vote for our income tax flyer. We're not sending it to a guy that gets noincometax.com monthly. We can make sure that we're doing that. And that's going to be probably the best way overall to make sure that your voice, your message is reaching the people it needs to. When we talk about the online video, we can target that. We can only target that really, though, to geographic areas. We're not going to be able to target it down to specific voters. It usually is well received by people. People watch it because the stuff that we produce is very appealing. The internet ads are also targetable to the geographic area. They are very inexpensive, like we talked about. Facebook ads, we can target to voter lists. A little trickier, but we can make sure that we get that Facebook ad to the same target voters that we're targeting through direct mail. Radio is a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit harder to do, and I'm not sure that it's worth the investment because we do have constrained budgets a lot of times with the levies that you're running, but it's there if we have a little extra. I don't even want to talk about TV because it's too expensive for us. But all of these choices come down to the budget and how much money your campaign has to spend to reach out to voters. This is a whole cadre. We can help you figure out what you need, but this does not include that earned media press piece. And that's the next part.
And I think it's interesting to note too, Doug, that something we talked about earlier before we started online is the most inexpensive things you can do are really the most effective. And the most expensive things you can do tend to be the most ineffective. And all I'm saying is you can target people going door to door. You can target people with online ads and Facebook ads, which are all very inexpensive and we can do very easily. But the stuff that's expensive, like the radios and the billboards and signs and TV, those are very expensive and you can't really target anybody specific. So you can be getting more no votes than yes votes with some of those things based on the messaging and actually who's actually tuning in that day or driving by that sign.
You'll notice nowhere in here are we talking about yard signs.
Yep.
Andy and I have long had conversations about yard signs. My thought on yard signs is they are important. They're important to have enough that people see that you have yard signs, but they're not so important that you should break your budget on them. You don't need a yard sign in every yard everywhere in the city. You need them in influential people's yards or places that people drive by often.
Right.
Enough that people see that they're there.
And I actually talked about this with Doug. So when we run our campaigns in our city, we actually we know exactly who the yes and no voters are. We make sure we know what they are. And for example, if a street's got, let's say, 50 houses on it, and on that street there's 25 voters, and 20 of them are no votes, and 5 of them are yes votes, and one of the yes votes wants a sign, we generally won't put a sign there because you're literally letting 20 no voters, know that there's an election coming up, and so it means. And my point there is, it's very hard to target that, and you're spending money on something that can actually cost you votes.
Okay, I'd like to hop in on this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, here's a stunner. Yeah, guys. So I up until the last couple of years was a very zealous anti-yard sign person. I've run a bunch of elections. I did campaigns for a living outside of the IFF for about 9 years, and never once did I win a yard sign war, but I won a lot of elections. Yard signs. Think about a yard sign like this. You're running an election, so yeah, you see the yard signs everywhere. It's the same way when you're looking for a house, you see real estate signs everywhere. But if you're not into it and you're not engaged, which most voters are not until until kind of the last minute, you're not really looking for yard signs. And in candidate elections, especially, if you're not really, the top of the ticket that's got good name recognition, your signs are kind of, who knows? In my city, in Alexandria, Virginia, people love putting up yard signs. They are all over the median in my neighborhood. There's a big, little park strip that runs through the main street, and the campaigns all just dump their signs out there, and there's hundreds of them. The problem is, it's for school board and it's for city council. And if you're not a really plugged in voter, you may not know who these people are. So, I get to the polling place, and look, I do this for a living. So I knew my city council guys, but I didn't know who the hell the school board people were. And I was literally trying to rack my brain at the polling place for which of these school board people is actually, okay for the teachers union and which one's not. And I was getting to the point where I was trying to think about whose signs were in the yard of the guy that had a Trump sign so I could vote against him. but I couldn't remember. So, I mean, that's, and you're talking about somebody that does this for a living. Now, I think for a ballot measure, I think there is utility to them. I think the yes on 1, yes on 4A, whatever, that can be helpful. But if I see a budget that's, we're going to spend $5,000 on yard signs and $1,000 on one postcard, I'm going to say that's a bad budget. Signs are the thing that you fund after you've funded 3 pieces to 4 pieces of direct mail and a healthy digital advertising buy. You still should do them. And again, the reasons laid out that, yes, you want voters to see that there is a campaign. There are people in the community that, that do look for it. But those are kind of few and far between. And at a certain point, the signs are there to sort of appease them. And, there's some value to having them, for the late voter who just barely starts paying attention at the end of the election, and maybe they see it on the way to the school where they're going to go vote. But there are way more effective campaign tactics than yard signs. And honestly, even to the level of worrying about where they go, I wouldn't do it. The time you spend worrying about who puts a yard sign in their yard and are there enough voters on their block, you're spending time that you could be spending recruiting people to go knock doors and have a face-to-face conversation with the voter that you need to persuade. So I view signs as give them out to your volunteers, give them out to folks that are supportive on the doors. I mean, if you go door knocking, take 10 signs on the back of your car. And if somebody answers the door and says, hell yeah, you guys saved my grandpa last year when he was having a heart attack, I want to put one of these I want a sign for my yard, you can go get them a sign and put it up. But I would not expend, people go to all these great lengths to have a sign plan and sign tactics. If anyone ever tells you that there is a metric, a number, a yard sign per vote number, they are a wizard, and you should throw them in a lake to see if they drown. It's just not. There's no science to it. It's not a targetable campaign metric. Do them, but don't spend it. Avoid making them a budget priority, and avoid wasting time on them.
So now that we've killed yard signs, let's move on.
Yeah. I knew we would get to that.
I know it's so much fun.
Doug and these guys love spinning me up on this.
We talked about earned media a little bit. It is valuable. It reinforces. It doesn't cost actual money, but there is a cost to it, and that's your time to make it happen. If you have a friend in the media, that's great, but a lot of times it's hard to get a TV station to pay attention to a smaller municipality or smaller township's tax levy.
I think there's a good
not worth the time that it takes.
I'm sorry, Doug. I think there's a place to remind people the same thing, like with the Facebook thing. Starting a campaign is not the time to say, hey, let's get a Facebook page. Starting the campaign isn't the time to say we need good media relations or good council relations or good citizen relations. I mean, we should, your local should be doing all these things all the time. You should have an outreach to the media already. You should have outreach to Facebook and your citizens and your community and your board. And then this just makes it that much easier to go down that road. It's not an ask as much as it is just another story.
Yeah, ideally we've spent the year before we need to run a campaign building the local president and the local as the public safety advocates and experts of the community. And one of those tactics, and if you're interested, reach out to me. This is Doug. Reach out to me at dstern@iaff.org, and we'll get you started with the strategic communications plan. Because we're going to build all those things. And one of the parts of that plan is to put your local president as a byline on a monthly safety article in the local newspaper. Now, if you're, Lansing, you're probably not going to get in Lansing's big paper, but there's a bunch of little neighborhood papers that are always looking for content. And that's usually the best place to build yourself as the neighborhood guy, as the guy that really cares about safety in our community. It resonates with older voters who tend to vote a lot more. And you're never going to mention the levy, but you're always going to mention about how the firefighters are there to protect the community. So the messaging stays the same without the actual persuasion of a yes vote. I think that's integral when we talk about earned media, that you have to have your earned media plan already rolling before you start a levy, before you start any kind of campaign.
That's great stuff, Doug.
So as we talk about campaign phases, Andy, you want to take this one?
Yeah, and honestly, we can kind of blow past this. This is just to kind of give you a sense of the flow of the campaign. At the beginning of the race, you're doing your research. That means you're checking into the laws. You're checking into when the ballots are going to go out. You're figuring out the rules of the game. You're figuring out the facts of the case of what you're going to argue. The next phase is, with all that information, you write up your plan. The first phase of executing on the campaign is gathering resources. It's getting your money together. It's organizing your calendar. It's recruiting your volunteers. And then the main bulk of what a lot of people publicly think of the campaign is the resource deployment. You're getting your volunteers out on the doors. You're spending your money on those direct mailers. But this is just as much to let you guys know that there is a lot of work to be done before the public front-facing part of the campaign. But we can kind of move past this one. These are a couple of points. We actually ran a class at ALTS on best practices for local elections. The title was called Yard Signs Don't Vote, in case anybody's wondering about the yard sign conversation. This was a couple of points that I really wanted to get across here on the time resource. Start early. A lot of people think about campaigns as Labor Day to Election Day or 60 days or something like that. There is no reason you can't start earlier. Most like a congressional race at this point. If you've got a November of 2020 election, you are starting now because it gives you more time to find more people and more money.
And,
on the people resource.
Andy, real quick
Yeah.
on that, I tagged that absentee resources in parentheses there about in Michigan, we've had several locals come to us for an August August millage vote, and they want to start a campaign at the end of June.
Nope.
Absentee voters are already starting to get their absentee mailers somewhere towards the beginning of July. So, and you can actually find out when and especially if you have a good relationship with your clerk, they might just email you and tell you, but you can find out from your clerk when they exactly are sending those absentee voters out. So you can time some of your mailers directly to when those absentee voter pieces are being sent out to the voters. So it's a big thing. You can't start that late, because if you start a campaign that late, you're already missing a huge chunk of the voters. And in Michigan, a lot of people absentee vote.
Yeah, think about it this way. If it takes you 60 days to stand up enough resources, again, people and money, to communicate, let's say 4 times, once on the doors, 3 times in the mail with your targeted voters, then, and you know that people are going to start voting, 30 to 45 days before Election Day, then you need to move your calendar back 30 to 45 days. So you need to look at starting that really in the next month if you've got an August election. Some of it's going to be behind the scenes work and planning, but you should probably be on the doors by Memorial Day for that kind of an election, maybe sooner. And again, it depends on how many people do you have. Do you have enough volunteers? Do you have enough members, family, friends to be able to cover those doors? And if you don't have a lot of people, you need more time to be able to have them reach enough voters. On the people resource. A couple of things on here. Build a solid campaign structure. Make sure you know who's making decisions. And we're watching right now a campaign that has a lot of different people that have roles in the decision-making process, and it makes the decisions take a lot of time. And there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of confusion sometimes about who's actually in charge. Have somebody that's a final arbiter on decision-making, or have a system in place that says, okay, these 5 guys have to get together, a majority vote makes the decision and everybody agrees to it. Whatever you have to do, get it decided ahead of time. Build a plan that empowers volunteers. If you're one guy that's the campaign manager and you need to be, handling the direct mail program and earned media, press conference conversations, and volunteer activity, you're going to get run ragged. So build a structure where you've got somebody that's a deputy that can handle cutting canvas turf, or, that you can trust to make sure that print files are getting to the printer for the direct mail pieces, and engage your members early. If you come to your membership 2 months out from an election, say, hey, guys, we have this critical election, we have to get involved now, they're not going to know what you're talking about. You got to talk about the importance of involvement in local politics. You can separate it from state and federal, that's fine. But you got to talk to them about the importance of being engaged in your city elections, your fire board elections, and your local revenue races almost all year round, so that they're not surprised and that they're ready for it. The more warning you can give them, the more they can say, okay, maybe I won't plan the big 3-week trip up to the Boundary Waters this year. If you've got a 15-man local and you've got 4 people that are going to be on lengthy vacations over that summer, you're going to have a hard time finding enough volunteers, because everybody else is going to be working extra shifts. So the more in advance you can tell guys, like, hey, we know that next spring we're going to have a revenue measure on the ballot that we got to pass, or we lose 4 positions, the more that those guys can have the expectation in mind that they need to be there. On the money front, budget carefully. Limit your overhead. If you can avoid paying rent, avoid it. If you can avoid spending extra money on signs that you don't need to, avoid it. Like I said, still get some signs, but don't get 1,000 signs if you're a city of 10,000 people. Avoid giveaways. People sometimes want to buy all the T-shirts in the world, or they want to have little tchotchkes to hand out at parades. avoid that stuff if you can. You know, don't break the bank on a big expensive kickoff party. You know, get things donated. And frankly, if you are doing fundraising, a lot of people want to do events to raise money. Fundraising events all have overhead. You know, you got to rent space, you got to buy beer, you got to buy food. Even a simple barbecue one that's going to be, you know, a few $100 if you're really trying to do a fundraiser for a campaign effort. A lot cheaper, a lot easier to just directly ask people for money. So avoid overhead, budget carefully, and you know, tips for success: use us, use our resources here. We are here it's like Doug said earlier. We're basically a consulting firm on retainer for you. Our political department, from our end of things, we can help you with voter file, which we didn't even get into here, but the database of all registered voters, we have that. We can help you use it. We can give you ideas for how to plan your campaign. We can give you advice. I've got a team on staff here that, you know, anytime there's a question about a ballot measure, a candidate effort, we're gonna get involved. So reach out to us.
And Doug, not just that, we can design everything from your mailers to the yard signs that Andy hates to a logo for your campaign. We are really a one-stop shop for all of your literature. And then through E18, we can do all of your video work as well. It really is a phone call away. And I don't want to get too much into what we're going to do or what we're not going to do, because everything is a little bit different. Everybody has a little bit different needs. That's why as soon as you know something's going on, we all need to sit down and have a conversation between my team and Andy's team and you to make sure that we can get you what your specific situation calls for. So we can make sure that you're successful, and not just successful in passing the levy and getting, you know, the increased funds for your community, but building a relationship with your powers that be as well. You know, I've seen several of these where, you know, somebody uses our resources and it helps them get a better relationship with their elected officials because they realize the IAFF local wasn't just looking out for itself. It was looking out for the whole community and stepped up big to help pass something like this.
And at the MPFFU, we've just got you, obviously your district vice presidents. A lot of times that's the first call. That way they can put you in touch with all this stuff. They've got access. They know who to call, where you know, how to get in touch with all these people, what the chain of command is. So your DVP is a great resource to start. They also have access to our legal stuff. There's IFF legal stuff. And at the end of the day, like Andy talked about at the beginning, you know, talk to your attorney. You know, anything we've done today is not legal advice. So we always say if you've got a legal question, you know, ask your attorney about it and make sure you get the right answer. I want to end by saying, do you have anything else, gentlemen, before I kind of close this up? We're right on an hour right now, so it's perfect.
I've got nothing. I think
okay.
We covered most of everything we need to.
Excellent. Well, I just want to really thank you guys. This is a huge thing for the IFF. You guys are two of the best people in the business to deal with this stuff, and to give us your time for an hour plus setting this thing up is incredible. And we do appreciate the IFF, and we appreciate everything that you guys have done, and appreciate your time this morning. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
If you guys can please take a moment, there's a survey, if you can complete that survey. And as I said earlier, this is recorded, so it'll be available on the site. Everybody have a great day, and thank you for attending.